My name is Nia. I am 32 years old, and today I watched my family's illusion of excellence shatter into a million pieces. During a Thanksgiving family dinner, my mother shouted that I either give my room to my younger sister or pack my bags and get out of her house. I did not shed a single tear. I quietly packed my bags, left, and bought a mansion on a hillside. 2 days later, I was enjoying my new home while they were facing the brutal reality of their fake wealth. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. Growing up in Atlanta meant presenting a perfect image to the world. But inside our home, emotional manipulation permeated every corner. My family worshipped status, designer labels, and appearances above all else. As a forensic accountant and wealth manager, I saw the true numbers behind their lies. I chose a quiet life, building a highly lucrative financial consulting firm, while they paraded around in leased luxury cars and unpaid debt. My modest clothes made me the family joke. They had no idea I was the only thing keeping them from the streets. The scent of roasted turkey and candied yams filled the dining room, but the atmosphere was thick with a toxic tension. My mother Vivica sat at the head of the table wearing a silk dress she had bought on a credit card I secretly paid off every single month. She clinked her crystal wine glass with a silver spoon, demanding everyone's immediate attention. The room fell silent. She looked directly at me, her eyes cold and calculating. Nia, she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Zuri and Trey are moving into the master suite tonight. I need you to move your things down to the unfinished basement immediately. I set my fork down, slowly staring back at her. The basement was damp, prone to flooding, and completely lacked proper heating. Zuri, my 25-year-old sister, sat across from me, admiring her fresh manicure. She was a failed lifestyle influencer who had never held a real job in her life. Her boyfriend Trey sat beside her. He called himself a music producer, but everyone in the city knew he was just a scammer looking for a free ride. Why do they need the master suite? I asked calmly, keeping my voice perfectly level. Zuri rolled her eyes and huffed dramatically, crossing her arms over her chest. Because Trey and I need good natural light to film content for my brand Nia. You would not understand because you have absolutely zero aesthetic. You just sit in your dark room crunching numbers on your little laptop all day. I need the space to create and grow my audience. I looked at my mother, ignoring my sister's childish outburst. I pay the utilities, Mom. I also pay the property taxes on this house. I am not moving into a damp basement so Zuri can film makeup tutorials. My sister-in-law Keisha let out a loud, mocking laugh. Keisha was married to my older brother Jamal, and she was obsessed with projecting wealth she did not actually possess. She spent her days pretending to be a socialite, posting curated photos on Instagram while dodging calls from debt collectors. She had moved into our family home 3 years ago, claiming it was a temporary arrangement while they looked for a house. That was a lie. They were completely broke, entirely dependent on the very same financial stability they despised me for providing. She wore a fake Chanel dress and carried a counterfeit Birkin bag she bought from a warehouse in Smyrna. You are so selfish, Nia, Keisha sneered, pointing a manicured finger at me. You are a single woman with no husband and no prospects. You do not need a massive room. Zuri is building an empire. You should be supporting black businesses, especially your own sister. Jamal chimed in, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored shirt. He claimed to be a crypto entrepreneur, but he was drowning in debt and leased cars he could not afford to maintain. Keisha is right, Jamal said, shaking his head. You are a bitter spinster, Nia. You hoard your little paychecks while the rest of us are actually making moves in the city. You should be grateful Mom even lets you stay here. You are embarrassing. You bring no value to the family name, dressing like a substitute teacher. I looked around the table at the faces of my family. They were a collection of frauds, desperately clinging to an image of success while sinking in financial ruin. I was the one secretly managing the accounts, ensuring the house was not foreclosed on, and keeping the lights on. Yet they treated me like a peasant in my own castle. My mother slammed her hand on the dining table, rattling the expensive china. Do not you dare disrespect your brother and sister, Vivica shouted, her face flushed with sudden anger. Jamal is a CEO. Zuri is an influencer. They are building a legacy. What are you doing? Nothing. You bring nothing to this family, but negativity. I am making this very simple for you. Either give your room to your younger sister right now, or pack your bags and get out of my house. I stared at the woman who had given birth to me. For my entire life, I had contorted myself to fit into her narrow, superficial boxes. I had paid her bills, covered her tracks, and absorbed her constant verbal abuse, hoping that one day she would simply love me for who I was. But looking at her distorted, furious expression, the last remaining thread of my loyalty snapped. The realization washed over me like a cold wave. I owed these people absolutely nothing. Losers do not make the rules here. The room went dead silent. Keisha smirked, sipping her wine with immense satisfaction. Zuri crossed her arms, looking at me with pure triumph. Jamal shook his head in disgust. They all waited for me to break down, to cry, to beg for forgiveness, or to submissively carry my boxes down to the moldy basement. I did not cry. I did not argue. I simply picked up my linen napkin, wiped my mouth, and stood up from the table. I looked at my mother with a calm, freezing smile. "Okay," I said softly. "I will go." I walked out of the dining room and headed straight upstairs to the master suite. Behind me, I could hear Keisha laughing loudly and telling Zuri to start planning her new room layout. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally put the family outcast in her place. Inside my room, I pulled two large suitcases from the back of the closet. I packed only my essential clothes, my laptop, and my highly secure external hard drives. Everything else could burn for all I cared. Then I walked over to the massive custom-built oak desk sitting in the corner of the room. It was a beautiful piece of furniture worth thousands of dollars. I knew Zuri was planning to use it as her new vanity station. I went to my closet, pulled out a heavy steel sledgehammer I kept for home repairs, and walked back to the desk. With one powerful swing, I brought the heavy hammer down on the center of the desk. The thick wood cracked violently. I swung again, shattering the glass top and splintering the solid oak legs. I destroyed it completely, ensuring Zuri would never film a single video on it. I dropped the hammer, grabbed my two suitcases, and walked downstairs. My family was still in the dining room, laughing, eating turkey, and drinking expensive wine. I did not say a word to any of them. I walked out the front door into the crisp November night and opened my rideshare app. As I stepped into the waiting car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The driver asked if the temperature was comfortable, and I nodded, leaning my head against the cool leather window. For the very first time in my life, my chest felt incredibly light. There was no more guilt, no more obligation, and no more hiding my true power. I pulled my phone out and looked at the glowing screen. It was an encrypted email from my real estate attorney. "The wire transfer is fully complete. Your 3.2 million USD Buckhead mansion purchase is successful." I smiled as the car drove away from the toxic prison I had called home. Let them enjoy their turkey and their false sense of victory tonight. Tomorrow morning, they would wake up to a reality they were completely unprepared to handle. For me, the real feast was only just beginning. 2 days later, I was sitting on the expansive balcony of my new Buckhead mansion, sipping a perfectly brewed espresso. The morning air was crisp, and the view of the Atlanta skyline was breathtaking. It was a stark contrast to the moldy, unfinished basement Vivica had tried to banish me to. My phone resting on the glass patio table had not stopped buzzing since sunrise. The screen was a continuous cascade of frantic texts and missed calls. By walking out that door, I had silently pulled the financial life support from under my family. I had immediately logged into my secure banking portal and canceled every auto draft payment I was funding. The mortgage on the family home, the electric bill, the water, and most importantly, Vivica's secondary credit cards were all instantly frozen. I took another sip of espresso, imagining the scene unfolding across town. I knew Vivica's schedule. Thursday mornings were strictly reserved for her elite church gala preparations. She was likely at a luxury boutique in Phipps Plaza right now, trying to purchase a $4,000 custom gown to impress the pastor's wife. I could vividly picture the mortification on her face when the sales associate politely informed her that her card was declined. Not just one card, but all of them. A public humiliation in the heart of Atlanta's high society was my mother's ultimate nightmare. She thrived on the illusion of black excellence, and I had just exposed the fact that her entire lifestyle was subsidized by the daughter she treated like garbage. The family group chat, which I had muted but not left, was an absolute war zone of panic and misplaced anger. Jamal sent a voice note, his tone caught between rage and panic. "Nia, what the hell are you doing? Keisha's car just got repossessed from the driveway. You better fix this right now." Keisha followed up with a barrage of text messages, her fake socialite persona completely shattered. "You are a bitter, jealous snake, Nia. You are trying to ruin our lives because you cannot get a man. You are destroying this family." Zuri chimed in, complaining that the Wi-Fi had been shut off and she could not upload her daily influencer vlog. Viveka's voicemail was the most satisfying. It was a screeching, breathless rant. "Nia, you ungrateful wretch. How dare you cut off my cards? I am standing in the middle of Neiman Marcus looking like a fool. Turn the accounts back on immediately, or I will call the police and report you for financial abuse. I am your mother. You owe me." I listened to the voicemail twice, a slow smile spreading across my face. Financial abuse. The irony was almost too sweet to bear. They had been financially abusing me for nearly a decade, draining my accounts to fund their delusions of grandeur, while simultaneously tearing down my self-esteem. I simply set the phone face down and opened my laptop. I ignored their desperate cries. They were experiencing the natural consequences of biting the hand that fed them. My email chimed with an encrypted notification. It was the confidential dossier I had requested from my private investigator. I had hired him a month ago when I first suspected Jamal was siphoning money from my mother's retirement accounts to fund his lavish lifestyle. I opened the file, and what I found was far worse than I had anticipated. The game had officially begun, and I had all the winning cards. The dossier contained detailed bank statements and communication logs, proving that Jamal's so-called cryptocurrency business, Apex Holdings, was nothing more than a poorly constructed Ponzi scheme. He was not an entrepreneur, he was a common thief. He had been soliciting investments from members of Viveka's megachurch, promising them guaranteed returns, and using their money to pay off his luxury car leases and Keisha's wholesale designer knockoffs. The walls were closing in on him fast. The IRS had already flagged his accounts for suspicious activity. It was only a matter of time before federal agents knocked on the front door of the house I used to pay for. Trey's file was equally pathetic. Zuri's boyfriend, the self-proclaimed music producer who had demanded my master suite, was an absolute fraud. He did not own a recording studio. He was completely broke, living off Zuri's non-existent income, and had a secret second phone he used to communicate with multiple other women. He was a serial scammer targeting insecure women, and Zuri, desperate for the aesthetic of a power couple, had fallen right into his trap. I closed the laptop, feeling a surge of absolute power. My family had demanded I leave so they could build their legacy. Instead, they had handed me the exact tools I needed to dismantle their entire fraudulent existence. They thought they had discarded a weak, submissive daughter. They had no idea they had unleashed a highly skilled forensic accountant who now had the motivation and the resources to destroy them completely. A week later, the financial shockwave had fully settled into their daily lives, turning their faux luxury existence into a desperate scramble for survival. I had not spoken a single word to any of them since Thanksgiving night. I was focused entirely on my real life, preparing for a critical meeting with my most important and secretive client, Mr. Harrison. He was a billionaire real estate and media mogul in Atlanta, a man who commanded respect in every room he entered. He valued discretion and competence above all else, which is why he trusted me to manage a significant portion of his private wealth portfolio. We were scheduled to meet at the Onyx Club, an exclusive members-only, Black-owned country club in the heart of the city. It was a place where old money and genuine power converged, far away from the flashy fake wealth my family desperately tried to project. I arrived early, dressed in a sharp-tailored charcoal suit that commanded quiet authority. I waited in the grand marble-floored lobby, reviewing market projections on my tablet. As I sat there, the heavy mahogany doors of the club swung open. I did not have to look up to recognize the loud, obnoxious voices echoing through the elegant lobby. It was Jamal, Keisha, and Vivica. They were dressed in their finest, most flashy clothing, clearly trying to project an image of extreme wealth. Jamal was sweating profusely, arguing with the impeccably dressed maitre d'. "I need a table," Jamal insisted, his voice rising in panic. "I am meeting potential investors for my crypto firm. I am Jamal Anderson. You must have a cancellation. Do you know who I am?" The maitre d' remained perfectly calm, his expression unreadable. "I apologize, sir. The Onyx Club is strictly members only. We do not accept walk-ins regardless of who you claim to be. Please lower your voice or I will have to ask security to escort you out." Vivica stepped forward, her face tight with indignation. "How dare you speak to my son that way? He is a chief executive officer. We belong here. We are the elite of Atlanta." I watched the scene unfold with a mixture of amusement and pity. They were so desperate for validation, so eager to insert themselves into spaces they had not earned. Keisha, scanning the lobby with her usual haughty glare, suddenly spotted me sitting quietly in the corner. Her eyes widened, and then a cruel, familiar smirk spread across her face. She nudged Jamal and pointed directly at me. "Well, well, well," Keisha said loudly, her voice piercing the quiet hum of the lobby. "Look who is here begging for a waitressing job. I guess that little stunt you pulled on Thanksgiving did not work out so well for you, did it, Nia? You look absolutely pathetic sitting there." Jamal turned, his eyes flashing with a mix of relief and intense anger. He marched over to my chair, Vivica and Keisha trailing right behind him, like loyal henchmen. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face in public after what you did to this family," Jamal hissed, pointing a finger in my face. "You canceled the mortgage. You cut off Mom's cards. You are trying to ruin us out of pure spite." Vivica crossed her arms, glaring down at me. "You are a disgrace, Nia. A selfish, ungodly daughter. You are going to fix this right now. You are going to pay for our table here so Jamal can host his meeting, and then you are going to turn those accounts back on. Consider it an apology for your disgusting behavior." I slowly closed my tablet and looked up at them. I did not raise my voice. I did not break my calm composure. I am not paying for anything I said softly. And I am certainly not apologizing for cutting off the leeches that have been draining my accounts for years. You wanted me out. I left. Enjoy the consequences of your own demands. Vivica gasped, her face twisting with rage. She reached out, attempting to physically grab my leather handbag from the small table next to me. "Give me your card, Nia. You owe this family. You owe Jamal." Before her hand could even touch my bag, the VIP elevator doors behind us slid open with a soft chime. Mr. Harrison stepped out, flanked by two massive security guards. He surveyed the scene, his sharp eyes immediately assessing the situation. He ignored Jamal, who had instantly puffed out his chest, preparing to deliver his rehearsed elevator pitch to the billionaire. Mr. Harrison walked straight past him, stopping directly in front of my chair. He smiled warmly, extended his hand, and kissed my cheek. "My brilliant wealth manager, Mr. Harrison," said, his deep voice carrying clearly across the lobby. "My private portfolio is up 40% this quarter entirely, thanks to your exceptional strategy, Nia. It is wonderful to see you." He then turned slowly, fixing his gaze on Jamal, Vivica, and Keisha. His expression hardened into absolute disgust. He looked at the maitre d'. "Why are these people harassing my most valued partner? I want them removed immediately, and ensure they are permanently banned from this establishment. The Onyx Club does not tolerate this kind of trash." Keisha stood completely frozen, her jaw practically on the marble floor. Jamal's face drained of all color, his fake bravado instantly evaporating. Vivica looked as if she might faint right there in the lobby. Security moved in swiftly, grabbing Jamal and Keisha by the arms and forcefully escorting them toward the heavy mahogany exit doors. I picked up my tablet, stood up, and smiled warmly at Mr. Harrison. "Shall we discuss the new acquisitions over lunch, sir?" I asked, completely ignoring the frantic, humiliating exit of the people who used to be my family. The balance of power had officially shifted, and I held absolute control. A week later, the frantic energy of my family's financial crisis felt like a distant storm. I was entirely focused on the present. I sat in the grand, dimly lit lobby of the Onyx Club, waiting for my most important client, Mr. Harrison. The Onyx Club was an exclusive members-only establishment in Atlanta, a sanctuary for the city's black elite, where discretion and genuine wealth intersected. The air smelled of expensive leather and polished wood, a stark contrast to the chaotic desperation of my family's leased lifestyle. I was dressed in a sharp, understated navy blue suit exuding quiet authority. I reviewed market projections on my tablet completely at peace. Then the heavy mahogany doors of the club swung open, shattering the refined silence. The loud, incredibly obnoxious voices were unmistakable. It was Jamal, Keisha, and Vivica. They were dressed in overly flashy logo-covered clothing, a desperate attempt to project wealth they no longer possessed. Jamal was sweating profusely, waving his arms as he argued aggressively with the impeccably dressed maitre d' at the front desk. "I need a table right now," Jamal insisted, his voice echoing through the elegant lobby. "I am meeting potential investors for my crypto firm. I am Jamal Anderson. You must have a cancellation. Do you know who I am?" The maitre d' remained perfectly calm, his expression carefully blank. "I apologize, sir. The Onyx Club is strictly members only. We do not accept walk-ins regardless of who you claim to be. Please lower your voice or I will have to ask security to escort you out of the building." Vivica stepped forward, her face tight with absolute indignation. She adjusted her designer knockoff bag on her shoulder. "How dare you speak to my son that way? He is a chief executive officer. We belong here. We are the elite of Atlanta. You need to find us a table immediately." I watched the scene unfold with a mixture of amusement and deep pity. They were so desperate for validation, so eager to force themselves into spaces they had not earned. Keisha, scanning the lobby with her usual haughty glare, suddenly spotted me sitting quietly in the corner. Her eyes widened, and then a cruel, familiar smirk spread across her face. She nudged Jamal hard in the ribs and pointed directly at me. "Well, well, well," Keisha said loudly, her voice piercing the quiet hum of the lobby. "Look who is here begging for a waitressing job. I guess that little stunt you pulled on Thanksgiving did not work out so well for you, did it, Nia? You look absolutely pathetic sitting there." Jamal turned, his eyes flashing with a mix of relief and intense, misplaced anger. He marched over to my chair, Vivica and Keisha, trailing right behind him like loyal, vicious henchmen. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face in public after what you did to this family," Jamal hissed, pointing a finger directly in my face. "You canceled the mortgage. You cut off Mom's cards. You are trying to ruin us out of pure spite." Vivica crossed her arms, glaring down at me with pure hatred. "You are a disgrace, Nia. A selfish, ungodly daughter. You are going to fix this right now. You are going to pay for our table here so Jamal can host his meeting, and then you are going to turn those accounts back on. Consider it an apology for your disgusting behavior." I slowly closed my tablet and looked up at them. I did not raise my voice. I did not break my calm composure. I am not paying for anything, I said softly, ensuring my tone was ice cold. And I am certainly not apologizing for cutting off the leeches that have been draining my accounts for years. You wanted me out. I left. Enjoy the consequences of your own demands." Vivica gasped, her face twisting with rage. She reached out, attempting to physically grab my leather handbag from the small table next to me. "Give me your card, Nia. You owe this family. You owe Jamal." Before her hand could even touch my bag, the VIP elevator doors behind us slid open with a soft chime. Mr. Harrison stepped out, flanked by two massive security guards. He surveyed the scene, his sharp eyes immediately assessing the situation. He ignored Jamal, who had instantly puffed out his chest, preparing to deliver his rehearsed, desperate elevator pitch to the billionaire. Mr. Harrison walked straight past him, stopping directly in front of my chair. He smiled warmly, extended his hand, and kissed my cheek. "My brilliant wealth manager, Mr. Harrison," said his deep voice carrying clearly across the entire lobby. "My private portfolio is up 40% this quarter entirely, thanks to your exceptional strategy, Nia. It is wonderful to see you." He then turned slowly, fixing his gaze on Jamal, Vivica, and Keisha. His expression hardened into absolute disgust. He looked at the maitre d', who had already summoned additional staff. "Why are these people harassing my most valued partner? I want them removed immediately, and ensure they are permanently banned from this establishment. The Onyx Club does not tolerate this kind of trash. Keisha stood completely frozen, her jaw practically resting on the marble floor. Jamal's face drained of all color, his fake bravado instantly evaporating. Vivica looked as if she might faint right there in the lobby. Security moved in swiftly, grabbing Jamal and Keisha by the arms and forcefully escorting them toward the heavy mahogany exit doors. I picked up my tablet, stood up, and smiled warmly at Mr. Harrison. "Shall we discuss the new acquisitions over lunch, sir?" I asked, completely ignoring the frantic, humiliating exit of the people who used to be my family. The balance of power had officially shifted, and I held absolute control. The very next morning, the desperation of my family escalated into sheer lunacy. Furious about their public humiliation at the Onyx Club, Vivica and Jamal hired a cheap, desperate private investigator to track down my new address. They quickly discovered the location of my Buckhead mansion. However, trapped in their own delusions of superiority, they convinced themselves that I could not possibly own such a magnificent property. They decided I was merely a house sitter or a maid for a wealthy white family. While I was securely locked in my downtown office reviewing financial models, my security system alerted my phone. Zuri, Trey, and Keisha had trespassed onto the mansion's pristine grounds. I opened the live feed on my phone. Zuri was holding her phone high, broadcasting live on Instagram. She was posing provocatively by my infinity pool, claiming that Jamal had just purchased the estate for her. Keisha stood in the background, loudly insulting me to Zuri's 5,000 live viewers. "This is where my pathetic sister-in-law scrubs toilets," Keisha sneered into the camera. "She thinks she is doing something, but she is just the help. Jamal bought this for us. We are living the real luxury life." I sat in my office chair watching their pathetic display of fake wealth. I did not feel anger. I felt a profound sense of clinical detachment. They were trespassing on my private property, lying to their followers, and actively trying to defame me. It was time for a harsh reality check. I opened the smart home application on my phone and navigated to the exterior controls. With a single tap, I activated the high-pressure landscape irrigation system. On the live feed, I watched the chaos unfold. The heavy-duty sprinklers designed to water the expansive lawn with reclaimed muddy water blasted simultaneously. A thick jet of brown water hit Zuri square in the chest, knocking her phone out of her hand. Trey yelled and tried to run, slipping on the wet marble pool deck and falling flat on his back. Keisha screamed in absolute terror as the muddy water drenched her, completely ruining her counterfeit Birkin bag and her cheap designer knockoff outfit. They scrambled blindly toward the front gate, slipping and sliding in the mud, humiliated on a live broadcast to thousands of people. I saved the security footage. I drafted a brief text message and attached the video. I sent it directly to Vivica. The message was simple. "The trespassing security footage has been saved. Please find attached a $10,000 invoice for landscaping damages. Payment is due immediately." That evening, Vivica attempted her most dramatic manipulation tactic yet. Furious about the internet humiliation and the staggering invoice, she faked a severe heart episode and managed to get herself admitted to a local hospital. She summoned me, playing the dying mother card to perfection. I arrived at the hospital room expecting a medical emergency. Instead, I walked into a calculated ambush. The entire family was gathered in the sterile room. Jamal stepped forward, immediately blocking the door. He demanded that I sign over a 30% stake in my accounting business to him, to cover Vivica's medical bills, and to save the family's legacy. Keisha sneered from the corner, crossing her arms. "It is the least you can do since you are hoarding your little paychecks while your mother is suffering." I looked at Vivica, who was lying in the hospital bed, pretending to be weak. I refused. I told them I would not sign over a single cent of my company. Miraculously, Vivica recovered from her heart attack. She leaped out of the hospital bed, her face contorted with rage, and screamed that I was a disgrace to the Black community. She threatened to sue me for elder neglect and destroy my reputation in Atlanta. I did not argue. I tapped my smartwatch, stopping the audio recording I had started the moment I entered the room. I calmly informed them that extortion is a felony in the state of Georgia. I turned and walked out, leaving them panicked and completely powerless. The very next morning, the desperation of my family escalated into sheer lunacy. Furious about their public humiliation at the Onyx Club Vivica, and Jamal hired a cheap, desperate private investigator to track down my new address. They quickly discovered the location of my Buckhead mansion. However, trapped in their own delusions of superiority, they convinced themselves that I could not possibly own such a magnificent property. They decided I was merely a house sitter or a maid for a wealthy white family. While I was securely locked in my downtown office reviewing financial models, my security system alerted my phone. Zuri, Trey, and Keisha had trespassed onto the mansion's pristine grounds. I opened the live feed on my phone. Zuri was holding her phone high, broadcasting live on Instagram. She was posing provocatively by my infinity pool, claiming that Jamal had just purchased the estate for her. Keisha stood in the background, loudly insulting me to Zuri's 5,000 live viewers. "This is where my pathetic sister-in-law scrubs toilets," Keisha sneered into the camera. "She thinks she is doing something, but she is just the help. Jamal bought this for us. We are living the real luxury life." I sat in my office chair watching their pathetic display of fake wealth. I did not feel anger. I felt a profound sense of clinical detachment. They were trespassing on my private property, lying to their followers, and actively trying to defame me. It was time for a harsh reality check. I opened the smart home application on my phone and navigated to the exterior controls. With a single tap, I activated the high-pressure landscape irrigation system. On the live feed, I watched the chaos unfold. The heavy-duty sprinklers designed to water the expansive lawn with reclaimed muddy water blasted simultaneously. A thick jet of brown water hit Zuri square in the chest, knocking her phone out of her hand. Trey yelled and tried to run, slipping on the wet marble pool deck and falling flat on his back. Keisha screamed in absolute terror as the muddy water drenched her, completely ruining her counterfeit Birkin bag and her cheap designer knockoff outfit. They scrambled blindly toward the front gate, slipping and sliding in the mud, humiliated on a live broadcast to thousands of people. I saved the security footage. I drafted a brief text message and attached the video. I sent it directly to Vivica. The message was simple. "The trespassing security footage has been saved. Please find attached a $10,000 invoice for landscaping damages. Payment is due immediately." That evening, Vivica attempted her most dramatic manipulation tactic yet. Furious about the internet humiliation and the staggering invoice, she faked a severe heart episode and managed to get herself admitted to a local hospital. She summoned me, playing the dying mother card to perfection. I arrived at the hospital room expecting a medical emergency. Instead, I walked into a calculated ambush. The entire family was gathered in the sterile room. Jamal stepped forward, immediately blocking the door. He demanded that I sign over a 30% stake in my accounting business to him to cover Vivica's medical bills and to save the family's legacy. Keisha sneered from the corner, crossing her arms. "It is the least you can do, since you are hoarding your little paychecks while your mother is suffering." I looked at Vivica, who was lying in the hospital bed, pretending to be weak. I refused. I told them I would not sign over a single cent of my company. Miraculously, Vivica recovered from her heart attack. She leaped out of the hospital bed, her face contorted with rage, and screamed that I was a disgrace to the Black community. She threatened to sue me for elder neglect and destroy my reputation in Atlanta. I did not argue. I tapped my smartwatch, stopping the audio recording I had started the moment I entered the room. I calmly informed them that extortion is a felony in the state of Georgia. I turned and walked out, leaving them panicked and completely powerless. Their desperation reached a breaking point 2 weeks later. The bank had officially begun foreclosure proceedings on their home, the house I had secretly paid for until they threw me out. Jamal and Vivica, out of options and out of their minds, decided to forge a document. They created a fake codicil to my late father's will, claiming that 50% of all my future business earnings belonged to Jamal, whom they dubbed the man of the house. It was a laughable, amateurish forgery, but they were desperate enough to believe it would work. They showed up at my downtown office building with a sleazy discount lawyer they had likely found on a billboard. They barged past my receptionist, demanding an immediate meeting. I had them escorted into my conference room, where I sat waiting with my own legal counsel. Jamal threw the forged document on the table, trying to look intimidating. "You have been hiding assets," Nia, Jamal said, attempting to sound like a savvy businessman. "This document proves I am entitled to half of your company. You are going to sign over $500,000 today, or we take this to court and ruin your reputation in the Atlanta business scene." Vivica nodded vigorously, her arms crossed. "It is what your father wanted," she lied smoothly. "You have to honor his final wishes. You owe us." I looked at the forged document, then up at my mother and brother. The audacity was truly staggering. They were trying to steal from me to save the very house they had kicked me out of. I did not raise my voice. I simply smiled and slid a thick, leather-bound legal binder across the polished table. "You cannot sue me for money to save your house, Mom," I said softly, "because the bank already sold your foreclosed mortgage." Vivica frowned, confusion replacing her arrogant smirk. "What are you talking about? The bank is giving us 30 days to catch up on payments. Jamal is going to use your money to save it." I shook my head slowly, tapping the binder. "I suggest you look at the signature page of the new deed," I instructed. Jamal grabbed the binder, flipping hastily to the back page. His eyes scanned the document, and the color drained from his face completely. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. Vivica snatched the binder from him. "What does it say?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "It says that I bought the debt through my LLC," I explained calmly. "I am your landlord now, and because you just tried to extort me with forged legal documents, I am issuing a 30-day eviction notice." Vivica collapsed back into her chair, gasping for air as if she had actually been struck. Jamal stared at the forged codicil on the table, suddenly realizing the gravity of the felony he had just committed. The sleazy lawyer they had brought along quietly packed his briefcase and slipped out of the room, wanting absolutely no part of this disaster. "You have exactly 30 days to vacate my property," I told them, my voice devoid of any emotion. "I expect the keys on my desk by noon on the final day. If you cause any damage, I will press charges." In the days that followed, the reality of their impending homelessness set in. Jamal, desperate to save face and maintain his illusion of wealth, tried to act like a savvy businessman one last time. He approached me with a fake olive, begging me to just give him one of my smaller shell companies so he could use it to secure a business loan and save the family. Keisha smugly texted me, "Give your brother the company, or I will tell the whole church congregation you abuse your mother." I pretended to be defeated by the pressure. I agreed to transfer an LLC named Apex Holdings to Jamal. I drew up the transfer papers and presented them to him. Jamal, eager to boast to his fraternity brothers that he was finally a legitimate CEO, signed the transfer papers without reading them. Keisha immediately updated her Instagram bio to "wife of Apex Holdings CEO." They thought they had finally outsmarted me. They thought they had secured a lifeline. What Jamal did not know, and what I had deliberately orchestrated, was that Apex Holdings was an inherited liability. It was a toxic asset from a previous client burdened with an $800,000 IRS tax lien. By signing those papers, Jamal had just legally assumed all the debt. He was now on the hook for nearly $1 million in unpaid taxes. The trap was set, and the final curtain was about to fall. The church gala humiliation was imminent, and I was ready to watch their empire of lies burn to the ground. The $10,000 invoice for landscaping damages had barely been delivered to Vivica's phone when my own device began to ring incessantly. I was sitting comfortably in my sleek downtown office, reviewing the highly entertaining security footage of Keisha and Zuri slipping in the mud when the caller identification flashed with my mother's name. I let it ring. 2 minutes later, my brother Jamal was calling. Then Zuri. Then Keisha. It was a coordinated, desperate bombardment. Finally, a call came through from an unknown number. I answered it, fully expecting another one of Trey's cheap burner phones. Instead, a sterile, professional voice greeted me. It was an intake nurse from Emory University Hospital. She formally informed me that Vivica had suffered a severe cardiac event and was currently being admitted to the emergency cardiac wing. The nurse stated that my mother was asking for me, specifically claiming it might be her final hours on Earth. A normal daughter would have panicked, dropping everything to rush to her mother's bedside in a flood of tears. I, however, am a forensic accountant. My entire career is built on detecting anomalies, discovering hidden truths, and analyzing raw data. The timing of this sudden heart failure was statistically miraculous. It occurred exactly 12 minutes after I sent an invoice that would financially bury her. Nevertheless, I knew the rules of the toxic game my family played. If I did not show up, they would spin a vicious narrative to their mega-church congregation that I had callously abandoned my dying mother in her greatest time of need. I packed up my laptop, locked my office, and drove toward the hospital. I did not speed. I did not run any red lights. I drove with the calm, calculated precision of a woman walking into a battlefield she had already mapped out. I parked my car, adjusted my tailored blazer, and discreetly activated the highly sensitive audio recording application on my smartwatch. In the state of Georgia, only one party needs to consent to a recording. I was that party. I navigated the stark white corridors of the hospital until I reached the private room, number the nurse had provided. I pushed the heavy wooden door open and walked into what looked like a poorly rehearsed stage play. The atmosphere in the room was incredibly thick with manufactured grief. Vivica was lying in the hospital bed wearing a pristine silk nightgown that she had clearly brought from home, looking entirely too glamorous for a woman who had supposedly just survived a massive heart attack. Monitors beeped rhythmically in the background, but none of the alarms indicated any actual distress. Jamal paced back and forth near the window, dramatically rubbing his face to feign exhaustion. Zuri was sitting in a chair, loudly blowing her nose into a tissue without shedding a single genuine tear. Keisha leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, glaring at me with raw, unfiltered resentment. There were no doctors present. There were no nurses rushing around with crash carts. It was an ambush perfectly staged for my arrival. I stood at the foot of the hospital bed, keeping my hands folded neatly in front of me. "You called for me," I said, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Vivica let out a weak theatrical cough and slowly opened her eyes, fluttering her thick, false eyelashes. "Nia," she whispered, her voice trembling with fake frailty. "You came. I thought the stress of your cruel actions had finally pushed my heart to its absolute limit. I am knocking on death's door, Nia. The doctor says the financial anxiety you caused me triggered a massive cardiovascular episode." I looked at the heart monitor. Her resting heart rate was a steady, healthy 72 beats per minute. Her blood pressure was perfectly normal. I did not point this out. I simply waited in silence, letting them play their desperate hands. Jamal stopped pacing and marched over to me, aggressively invading my personal space. "This is your fault," Jamal hissed, pointing a finger directly at my chest. "You and your petty revenge stunts put Mom in this bed. You cut off the mortgage. You shut down the credit cards. And then you sent that ridiculous $10,000 invoice for some muddy grass. You are literally killing our mother with your extreme selfishness." Keisha pushed herself off the wall and stepped forward, sneering at me. "It is absolutely pathetic, Nia. You are sitting on a gold mine with your little accounting business, hoarding your paychecks while your own flesh and blood is suffering. The church is going to hear all about this. You are a disgrace to the family name." I did not blink. I kept my gaze fixed on my mother, who was watching me through half-closed eyes, waiting for me to break. "What exactly is the purpose of this gathering?" I asked calmly. "If Mom is truly having a medical emergency, she should be resting, not hosting a family grievance panel." Jamal pulled a thick, stapled document from his designer briefcase and slammed it down onto the rolling tray table at the foot of the hospital bed. "We have a solution," Jamal stated, puffing out his chest to project a fake sense of executive authority. "Mom's medical bills from this emergency are going to be astronomical. On top of that, we have to save the family home from foreclosure because of your reckless actions. We are offering you a chance to make things right and save the family legacy." I glanced down at the document. It was a transfer of ownership agreement. "I need you to sign over a 30% equity stake in your financial consulting firm to me," Jamal commanded, his voice dripping with unearned entitlement. "I am a seasoned cryptocurrency entrepreneur. I know how to scale businesses. I will take over the operational management of your firm, and we will use the generated profits to pay for Mom's recovery and maintain our lavish lifestyle. It is the only fair way to repay us for the massive damage you have caused today." Keisha laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed in the small hospital room. "It is the absolute least you can do, Nia. You do not even have a husband or a family of your own to spend that money on. You just scrub numbers all day. Jamal will take your little operation and turn it into a real black-owned empire. You should be thanking him for stepping up to fix your mess." Zuri chimed in from her chair, scrolling through her phone. "Seriously, Nia, just sign the papers so I can get my Wi-Fi turned back on. I am losing followers because I cannot post my daily vlog. You are ruining my brand with your selfish behavior." I stared at the document on the tray table. The sheer audacity of their plan was breathtaking. They had orchestrated a fake medical emergency, summoned me to a hospital, and were now attempting to extort a massive percentage of my highly successful self-built corporation to fund their fraudulent lives. They genuinely believed that family guilt and public pressure would force me to surrender my wealth. They thought I was the same quiet, submissive girl they had bullied in the dining room on Thanksgiving. They were profoundly mistaken. I looked up from the documents and met Jamal's aggressive stare. "I am not signing over a single percentage of my company to you, Jamal. I am not paying for this hospital room, and I am certainly not funding your leased cars or Keisha's fake designer bags. The answer is absolutely not." The room plunged into a tense, suffocating silence. Jamal's jaw dropped. Keisha's arrogant smirk instantly vanished. But it was Vivica's reaction that was the most spectacular. The dying, fragile woman lying in the hospital bed suddenly underwent a miraculous, instantaneous medical recovery. Vivica threw off her hospital blanket, swung her legs over the side of the bed, and leaped to her feet with the agility of a collegiate athlete. She marched right up to my face, her eyes blazing with furious, unrestrained hatred. "You ungrateful, wicked little girl," Vivica screamed, completely abandoning her weak, breathless persona. "I gave you life. I put a roof over your head. You owe everything you are to me. You are a complete disgrace to the Black community. We build each other up, but you just tear us down out of pure, unadulterated jealousy. I will destroy you, Nia. I will go to the police right now and press charges against you for elder neglect. I will tell the pastor, the congregation, and every single one of your wealthy clients that you abandoned your sick mother to die alone in a hospital. I will ruin your entire reputation in Atlanta until you are begging us for a waitressing job." She stood chest to chest with me, breathing heavily, fully expecting me to cower in fear of public ruin. In the past, the threat of church gossip and social destruction would have terrified me. Now it just proved how utterly powerless she truly was. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply raised my left hand and lightly tapped the face of my smartwatch. The screen glowed brightly, displaying a pulsing red icon indicating an active audio recording. I pressed the screen once, stopping the file, and saved it directly to my encrypted cloud server. Vivica's eyes darted to my wrist, her furious expression shifting into sudden, raw confusion. I looked calmly around the room, making sure to lock eyes with Jamal, Keisha, Zuri, and finally my mother. "That was a very passionate performance, Vivica," I said softly, my voice echoing clearly in the quiet hospital room. "But you should probably brush up on your legal definitions before you make threats. You see under Title 16, Chapter 8, Section 16 of the Georgia Code, attempting to obtain property or money through coercion, intimidation, or threats of exposing a secret is legally defined as extortion. Extortion is a serious felony offense punishable by up to 10 years in state prison." Jamal swallowed hard, stepping back from me. Keisha's hands started to tremble. Vivica stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing silently, as the terrifying reality of her actions crashed down on her. I have recorded this entire conversation from the moment I walked through that door. I continued, smoothing a tiny wrinkle on my tailored blazer. "The police will not be arresting me for elder neglect, considering you just leaped out of bed perfectly healthy. But the district attorney would be incredibly interested in a coordinated conspiracy to extort a business owner for 30% of her corporate equity." The monitors in the background continued their steady rhythmic beeping, the only sound in the completely paralyzed room. I picked up the forged transfer document from the tray table, tore it neatly in half, and let the pieces flutter to the sterile floor. If any of you ever try to contact me, ambush me, or extort me again, I will hand this audio file directly to the authorities. Enjoy paying this hospital bill on your own. I turned my back on my family and walked out of the room, the heavy wooden door clicking shut behind me. I left them standing there in utter silence, suffocating in their own panic. The game was far from over. I knew their desperation would only grow as their financial ruin became undeniable. But I had just checkmated their king, and they finally realized that the quiet sister they had always underestimated was the one holding all the power. I stepped into the elevator, my head held high, completely unbound. 2 weeks passed since the pathetic hospital ambush. The silence from my family was not a sign of surrender. It was the quiet, desperate plotting of cornered animals. My private investigator kept me fully updated on their rapid financial decay. The hospital billed Vivica directly for her miraculous recovery, an uninsured expense she could not afford. Jamal was facing mounting pressure from the angry church members he had scammed with his fake cryptocurrency firm. But their most critical problem was the family home. The sprawling brick estate in the suburbs, the physical proof of their imaginary excellence, was slipping through their fingers. Because I had canceled the auto draft payments, the bank had officially initiated foreclosure proceedings. They were drowning in past due notices and aggressive calls from debt collectors. Instead of getting real jobs or scaling back their luxurious lifestyle, Jamal and Vivica resorted to the only tactic they truly understood. They turned to outright criminal fraud. Desperation breeds a very specific kind of stupidity. They decided to forge a legal document. My late father had passed away 8 years ago, leaving behind a very standard simple will that left his modest life insurance policy to my mother. Jamal and Vivica fabricated a fake codicil to that will. They printed a document claiming that my father had mandated a traditional patriarchal financial structure for his children. This forged item explicitly stated that 50% of all my future business earnings and corporate equity rightfully belonged to Jamal, simply because he was the oldest son and the designated man of the house. It was a laughable, amateurish forgery that belonged in a cheap soap opera, but they were arrogant enough to believe it would actually terrify me into compliance. They even managed to find a sleazy discount attorney who operated out of a strip mall to represent them. They promised him a massive cut of the payout if he helped them intimidate me into settling out of court. I was sitting in my downtown high-rise office on a rainy Tuesday morning, finalizing a complex merger for Mr. Harrison, when my receptionist buzzed my secure intercom. She sounded incredibly tense. "Nia," she said, her voice dropping to an anxious whisper. "Your mother and brother are here in the lobby. They brought a man who claims to be their legal counsel. They are demanding an immediate meeting and threatening to cause a scene if you do not come out." I did not panic. I did not call security to have them removed. I smiled, saved my spreadsheet, and pressed the intercom button. "Send them into the main conference room," I instructed smoothly. "I will be right there." I grabbed a thick, heavy leather legal binder from my personal safe and walked down the glass-walled corridor. I opened the conference room door to find Vivica, Jamal, and their discount lawyer sitting at my custom marble table. Vivica was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and dark sunglasses, projecting an air of untouchable mourning. Jamal was wearing an ill-fitting suit, trying to look like a commanding chief executive. The lawyer looked like a man who chased ambulances for a living, sweating nervously as he took in the sheer wealth and power exuded by my corporate office. Jamal did not waste any time. He stood up, puffed out his chest, and slammed a manila folder onto the center of the marble table. "The game is over," Nia, Jamal declared, using his deepest, most aggressive voice. "You have been hiding your assets from this family for years. You have been building this massive accounting empire while leaving your own mother to suffer in poverty. But we finally found the truth. We found Dad's hidden instructions." Vivica dramatically removed her sunglasses, glaring at me with raw malice. "Your father knew you were a selfish, deceitful girl," she added, pointing a manicured finger at me. "He knew you would try to hoard your wealth. That is why he legally protected your brother. You owe Jamal half of everything you have ever made. You have to honor his final wishes. The sleazy lawyer cleared his throat and stood up, trying to look intimidating. Miss Anderson, he began, adjusting his cheap tie. We are in possession of a legally binding codicil executed by your late father. It clearly entitles my aunt to a 50% stake in your financial consulting firm. Now we are reasonable people. We do not want to drag your name through the Fulton County courts. We know you value your reputation in the Atlanta business community. We are willing to settle this matter quietly and privately today for a lump sum cash payment of $500,000. If you refuse, we will file a massive lawsuit tomorrow morning, and your billionaire clients will read all about your shady family dealings in the local business journals. I looked at the three of them. The audacity was truly staggering. They were actively trying to steal $500,000 from me using a fabricated document, all to save the very house they had violently kicked me out of on Thanksgiving night. I slowly pulled the manila folder toward me and opened it. I looked down at the forged document. As a forensic accountant, my entire career revolves around detecting financial anomalies and identifying fraudulent paperwork. This was the worst forgery I had ever seen in my professional life. This is fascinating, I said softly, tracing my finger over the signature line. The font used for this document is Calibri. Calibri was not released to the general public until 2 years after my father passed away. Furthermore, the notary seal stamped at the bottom belongs to a notary public whose commission expired 4 years before the date printed on this page. You did not even try to match the ink degradation. This is a digital signature ripped directly from his old tax returns and poorly pasted onto a fresh Word document. The sleazy lawyer went completely pale. He looked sharply at Jamal, his eyes wide with sudden panic. He instantly realized his clients had lied to him and handed him a fraudulent document, making him an accessory to a major felony. Jamal swallowed hard, his fake confidence faltering. The document is real, Jamal stammered, stepping back from the table. You are just trying to use your fancy corporate jargon to confuse us. You owe us that $500,000, Nia. Pay up right now or we go straight to the media. I let out a soft, genuine laugh. The sound echoed brightly off the glass walls of the conference room. I closed their manila folder and pushed it back toward Jamal. I then picked up the thick leather-bound legal binder I had brought from my safe and slid it smoothly across the marble table. It stopped directly in front of my mother. You cannot sue me for $500,000 to save your house, Mom, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level and devoid of any emotion. Because the bank already sold your foreclosed mortgage. Vivica frowned deeply, her arrogant expression collapsing into raw confusion. She looked from me to the binder, refusing to touch it. What on earth are you talking about? Vivica demanded, her voice rising in pitch. The bank is giving us 30 days to catch up on the missed payments. Jamal is going to use your settlement money to pay off the arrears and save the estate. We are not losing our home. I shook my head slowly, tapping the thick leather cover of the binder. I highly suggest you open that and look at the signature page of the newly executed property deed, I instructed calmly. Jamal lunged forward and grabbed the binder. He flipped hastily past the pages of complex financial legalese until he reached the final sheet. His eyes darted rapidly across the heavy black text. I watched as all the blood completely drained from his face. His hands began to shake violently, rattling the heavy pages. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing in stunned silence, completely unable to form a single coherent word. Vivica snatched the heavy binder right out of his trembling hands. What does it say, Jamal? She screamed, absolute terror finally breaking through her meticulously crafted facade. What did she do to our house? I leaned forward, resting my elbows gracefully on the cold marble table, interlacing my fingers. I looked directly into my mother's terrified eyes. It says that the bank bundled your severely delinquent mortgage and sold it to a private holding company to recoup their financial losses, I explained with surgical precision. I bought that debt through my anonymous corporate limited liability company. I paid the bank in full. I hold the absolute deed to the property. I am your landlord now. Vivica gasped, dropping the heavy binder onto the table, as if it had physically burned her hands. And because you just marched into my corporate office and attempted to extort me for $500,000 using a blatantly forged legal document. I continued, my voice dropping to a harsh, freezing whisper. I am officially issuing a 30-day eviction notice. You have exactly 1 month to pack your counterfeit bags and vacate my property entirely. I expect all the keys sitting on my reception desk by noon on the final day. If you remove a single fixture or cause any physical damage to my property, I will press maximum criminal charges for vandalism and felony extortion. The sleazy lawyer did not say a single word. He frantically grabbed his cheap briefcase, turned on his heel, and sprinted out of the conference room, desperate to escape the massive legal disaster he had just walked into. Viveka's knees buckled. She collapsed heavily into the leather executive chair behind her, clutching her chest and gasping for air as the devastating reality of her homelessness finally crushed her. Jamal stared at the forged cull sitting on the table, realizing he had just handed me the very weapon I needed to destroy him. I stood up, buttoned my tailored blazer, and walked out of the room, leaving them to drown in the absolute ruins of their own greed. The forged codicil disaster effectively destroyed what little rationality my family had left. With 30 days until their eviction from the property, I now owned the facade of black excellence my mother had cultivated for decades began to fracture in public view. The neighborhood gossip circuit was vicious, fueled by overdue landscaping bills, repossessed luxury vehicles, and Jamal's increasingly erratic behavior. He could no longer afford the lease on his imported sports car, forcing him to take ride shares to his fake business meetings. Viveka stopped attending her exclusive church functions, terrified that someone would ask about the bank foreclosure notices that had been mistakenly delivered to her neighbors. Desperation pushed Jamal to execute his most reckless gamble yet. He needed capital. He needed a legitimate corporate entity to secure a massive business loan, something he could leverage to pay off the bank arrears, stop the eviction, and miraculously save the family estate. His fake cryptocurrency startup was completely toxic, flagged by every major financial institution in Atlanta as a high-risk scam. He needed a clean, established limited liability company with a solid credit history, and he knew exactly who owned several of them. He approached me on a Thursday afternoon, completely bypassing my security protocols by waiting in the underground parking garage of my office building. He stepped out from behind a concrete pillar as I walked toward my car. "Nia, wait," Jamal said, holding up both hands in a gesture of surrender. "I am not here to fight. I am here to make a deal." I stopped, keeping a safe distance, my hand resting casually near the pepper spray in my bag. "I have nothing to say to you, Jamal. You and your lawyer tried to steal $500,000 from me. We are done talking. Please just listen to me for 2 minutes." Jamal pleaded, his voice cracking with genuine panic. "I know we messed up. I know the forged will was a mistake. We were desperate, Nia. Mom is losing her mind. The stress is physically destroying her. We are going to be on the street in 3 weeks. You hold all the cards now. You won." I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by his sudden display of humility. "What do you want, Jamal?" "I need a company," he said quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know you have dozens of smaller shell companies and holding LLCs that you use for your clients' real estate portfolios. I just need one of them. A clean corporate entity with a registered tax identification number. If I have that, I can secure a commercial bridging loan from a private lender. I can pay off the mortgage arrears, stop the eviction, and save the house. You will not have to deal with us ever again. Just give me one of your dormant companies, Nia. It costs you absolutely nothing." I stared at him, marveling at his sheer, unadulterated ignorance. He truly believed that corporate finance was a simple game of trading empty legal shells. He did not understand the intricate web of liabilities, tax obligations, and fiduciary responsibilities that governed these entities. He was a child playing with matches in a room full of gasoline. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from Keisha. "Give your brother the company, or I will tell the whole church congregation you abuse your mother. I will tell the pastor you forced her into the hospital and stole her house. I will ruin your name in Atlanta." I looked from the text message to Jamal's desperate, sweaty face. A brilliant, terrifyingly perfect plan suddenly materialized in my mind. They wanted a company. They wanted to play high-stakes corporate games. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for, wrapped in a bow made of razor wire. Jamal, I said, slowly lowering my phone and letting out a long, heavy sigh, expertly faking defeat. I am exhausted. I am tired of the fighting, the threats, the constant harassment. I just want this toxic nightmare to end. Hope blazed in his eyes. Does that mean you will do it? You will give me a company? I crossed my arms, looking away, as if I were wrestling with a difficult decision. I have an LLC named Apex Holdings, I lied smoothly. It is a dormant entity I set up a few years ago for a real estate acquisition that never materialized. It has a clean corporate registry and a valid employer identification number. It is essentially an empty vessel. If I transfer ownership of Apex Holdings to you, do we have an absolute ironclad agreement that you and Vivica will never contact me, extort me, or harass me ever again? Yes, Jamal practically shouted, stepping forward eagerly. Absolutely. You have my word as a man. Give me Apex Holdings and we will never bother you again. We will save the house and you can live your life. I nodded slowly, maintaining the illusion of a reluctant concession. Come to my office tomorrow at 9 in the morning. I will have my legal team draft the complete transfer of ownership documents. Do not be late. I got into my car and drove away, leaving him celebrating his imaginary victory in the damp parking garage. The moment I was safely on the highway, I called my lead corporate attorney. I need you to draft immediate transfer of ownership papers for Apex Holdings, I instructed. Jamal Anderson will be assuming 100% equity and complete operational control. Ensure the liability clauses are watertight. Apex Holdings was not a clean dormant entity. It was an inherited nightmare. 3 years ago, a wealthy client had engaged my firm to perform a forensic audit on his failing logistics company. I discovered massive systemic tax fraud. The client had been dodging federal payroll taxes for nearly a decade. When the audit concluded, the client abandoned the company, transferring the completely toxic asset to my firm in a desperate attempt to shield himself from liability. I had simply parked Apex Holdings in a corporate quarantine, waiting for the statute of limitations to expire or for an opportunity to liquidate it safely. Apex Holdings was currently burdened with an $800,000 federal tax lien from the Internal Revenue Service. It was a financial ticking time bomb, and Jamal had just begged me to let him hold it. The next morning, Jamal swaggered into my conference room like a conquering king. He was wearing a brand new, clearly rented designer suit. Keisha was right beside him, holding her phone up, practically live streaming the event to her followers. They truly believed they had successfully bullied me into surrendering a valuable piece of my empire. My attorney placed the thick stack of transfer documents on the table. Jamal did not bother reading a single page. He did not ask for a financial disclosure statement. He did not request a balance sheet or a liability report. He was too consumed by his own ego, too eager to boast to his fraternity brothers that he was finally a legitimate chief executive officer. He grabbed a pen and aggressively signed his name on every single dotted line, legally assuming total unconditional ownership of the company. Keisha immediately pulled out her phone and rapidly tapped the screen. I watched as she updated her Instagram biography in real time. It now read, "Wife of Apex Holdings CEO. Blessed and highly favored. Boss babe." "It is done," Jamal announced, tossing the pen onto the table and crossing his arms with a smug, victorious grin. "Apex Holdings belongs to me now. You made the right choice, Nia. You saved the family." I stood up, gathered my copy of the signed legal documents, and smiled warmly. "Yes, Jamal. You are now the sole owner and chief executive of Apex Holdings. I wish you the absolute best of luck with your new corporate responsibilities. Please remember our agreement. Do not contact me again." They paraded out of my office laughing loudly, completely oblivious to the catastrophic financial ruin they had just legally embraced. They thought they had secured a lifeline. They thought they had outsmarted the quiet, nerdy sister. What Jamal did not know, and what I had meticulously orchestrated with my legal team, was that by signing those transfer papers without conducting any due diligence, he had legally assumed the entire $800,000 IRS tax lien. The federal government does not care about family drama. They care about collecting their revenue, and they now had a brand new, highly visible target. I returned to my desk and initiated a highly confidential, perfectly legal maneuver. I filed a standard change of ownership notification with the Internal Revenue Service, officially updating the corporate registry for Apex Holdings. I provided them with Jamal's full legal name, his social security number, and his current residential address. The federal tax agents had been looking for a solvent entity to collect the massive debt from for years. I had just handed them their primary suspect on a silver platter. The trap was permanently set. The financial guillotine was suspended directly over his head, held by a single fragile thread. Jamal was about to discover that playing corporate games without understanding the rules is the fastest way to destroy your entire life. The countdown to his absolute annihilation had officially begun. All I had to do was sit back, pour a glass of expensive red wine, and wait for the federal agents to knock on his front door. The annual Excellence in Leadership Church Gala was the undisputed social event of the year for Atlanta's affluent Black community. It was a highly orchestrated display of wealth influence and supposed moral superiority. For Vivica, this gala was her absolute lifeline. It was the only place where her fabricated narrative of perfection still held any weight. She was absolutely determined to maintain her social standing, regardless of the fact that she was currently living in a foreclosed home that I now legally owned. To secure her position at the top of the social hierarchy, she had publicly promised a staggering $20,000 donation to the church's new community center building fund. This massive financial pledge was her guaranteed ticket to securing the highly coveted Mother of the Year award, a title she believed would completely insulate her from any neighborhood gossip about her impending eviction. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of a luxury downtown hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the sea of designer gowns and custom-tailored tuxedos. The room was buzzing with the city's elite politicians, business moguls, and prominent community leaders. Vivica arrived wearing a sequined gown that she had undoubtedly purchased on a maxed-out credit card. She glided through the room accepting compliments and projecting the image of a deeply blessed, highly favored matriarch. Jamal strutted beside her, acting as her proud escort, actively networking and handing out business cards for his newly acquired company, Apex Holdings. Keisha trailed slightly behind them, her chin held high, making sure everyone noticed her new status as the wife of a chief executive officer. They had absolutely no idea that I was also in attendance. I did not buy a standard ticket. I attended the gala as a platinum corporate sponsor, seated at the most prominent VIP table in the front of the ballroom, directly alongside my billionaire client, Mr. Harrison. I wore a stunning floor-length emerald green gown that caught the light, beautifully projecting quiet, undeniable power. I sat back, sipping sparkling water, watching my family work the room with their usual blend of arrogance and desperation. They were completely oblivious to the financial guillotine suspended directly over their heads. The evening progressed through a tedious series of choir performances, long-winded prayers, and mediocre catered food. Finally, the main event arrived. The senior pastor, a charismatic man with a booming voice, took the stage to announce the highly anticipated Mother of the Year award. He spoke passionately about sacrifice, devotion, and the importance of raising successful children who give back to the community. And now the pastor announced, gesturing grandly to the side of the stage, "It is my profound honor to present this year's award to a woman whose dedication to her family is only matched by her incredible generosity to this congregation. Please welcome to the stage Sister Vivica Anderson." The ballroom erupted in polite applause. Vivica practically floated up the stairs, beaming with pure, unadulterated triumph. She accepted the heavy glass trophy, stepped up to the microphone, and looked out over the crowd. She adjusted the microphone stand, her face arranged in an expression of deep, performative humility. "Thank you, Pastor," Vivica began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "I am truly humbled by this honor. Raising children in today's world is a profound challenge. It requires boundless love, endless patience, and sometimes it requires enduring deep personal heartbreak." She paused dramatically, looking out over the audience. I watched her from my VIP table, my expression perfectly blank. I knew exactly where this speech was going. She was about to use a church pulpit to publicly assassinate my character. Many of you know that I have two beautiful children who are here with me tonight. Vivica continued gesturing toward Jamal and Keisha's table. But what you may not know is the deep pain of having a selfish, ungodly daughter who has completely turned her back on her family. A daughter who has let greed and jealousy harden her heart. It is a burden I carry every single day. But I stand here tonight fortified by my faith, focusing only on the blessings God has bestowed upon my loyal, successful son. A collective murmur of sympathy rippled through the congregation. People nodded, whispering to each other, completely buying into her fabricated narrative of the suffering righteous mother. But God is so good, Vivica proclaimed, raising her voice to a triumphant crescendo. Because despite the darkness, the light always prevails. My incredible son Jamal has just taken over as the chief executive officer of a massive corporate entity, Apex Holdings. And tonight, to show our immense gratitude for God's favor, Jamal's new company is making a $20,000 donation to the Community Center Building Fund. The ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. People stood up clapping and cheering for the remarkable generosity of the Anderson family. Jamal stood up at his table, buttoning his rented suit jacket, waving to the crowd like a conquering hero. Keisha beamed, clapping loudly, completely absorbed in her fake reality. Vivica smiled, radiantly basking in the adoration. She gestured for Jamal to bring the giant, oversized ceremonial checkup to the stage. Jamal proudly carried the massive foam board which had Apex Holdings printed in bold letters and presented it to the pastor. Flashbulbs went off as the church photographer captured the glorious charitable moment. "This is truly a blessing," the pastor boomed into the microphone, holding the giant check high. "Thank you, Jamal. Thank you, Apex Holdings. Let us process this incredible donation immediately so we can break ground on the new youth center next month." The applause began to die down as the pastor handed the giant check to the church's lead financial administrator, a stern-looking woman with a clipboard. She took the foam board, but instead of walking off the stage, she paused. She looked down at her tablet, her brow furrowing in deep confusion. She tapped the screen several times, her expression shifting from confusion to outright alarm. She quickly walked over to the pastor and whispered something urgently in his ear. The pastor leaned back, his eyes widening in shock. He looked at the financial administrator, then at the giant check, and finally at Jamal, who was still standing on the stage, grinning proudly. The pastor cleared his throat awkwardly, tapping the microphone. "Excuse me, congregation. There seems to be a minor administrative issue," the pastor said, his booming voice suddenly sounding very small and uncomfortable. Vivica's smile faltered slightly. She glanced nervously at the financial administrator. "Is there a problem with the routing number, Pastor? Jamal can call his bank in the morning." The pastor looked at Vivica with a mixture of pity and severe embarrassment. "Sister Vivica, the financial administrator just ran the account routing information provided on this check through our instant verification system." The pastor explained, his voice echoing loudly in the completely silent ballroom. "The system is showing that this bank account has been entirely frozen by the Internal Revenue Service." The entire congregation gasped in unison. A wave of shocked whispers instantly swept through the massive ballroom. "Frozen." Jamal repeated, his voice cracking loudly. "That is impossible. I am the CEO. I just took over the company yesterday. There must be a glitch in your system." The financial administrator stepped up to the microphone, her face completely stern. "It is not a glitch, Mr. Anderson," she stated firmly, holding up her tablet for him to see. "The corporate registry clearly shows that Apex Holdings is currently burdened with an active $800,000 federal tax lien. All associated bank accounts, assets, and credit lines have been officially seized by the federal government. This $20,000 check has completely bounced." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. The golden, sparkling atmosphere of the luxury gala instantly shattered. Vivica stood frozen behind the podium, her mouth opening and closing silently. The heavy glass Mother of the Year trophy suddenly looked ridiculous in her hands. Her perfectly crafted illusion of black excellence, wealth, and moral superiority evaporated in real time, exposed as a massive, humiliating fraud in front of the entire Atlanta elite. Jamal stared at the financial administrator, his mind frantically trying to process the catastrophic reality of what he had done. He had eagerly signed transfer papers without reading them. He had wanted the title of CEO so badly that he legally assumed nearly $1 million in federal debt. He was not a successful entrepreneur. He was the primary target of an IRS investigation. Keisha, sitting at her table, covered her face with her hands, desperately trying to hide from the hundreds of judging eyes suddenly staring at her. From my VIP table, Mr. Harrison leaned over to me, his eyes gleaming with quiet amusement. "Was that the dormant company you mentioned during our strategy meeting last week?" he whispered discreetly. I took a slow, elegant sip of my sparkling water. It was Mr. Harrison. "It appears the new CEO is having some initial cash flow issues." The pastor awkwardly took the microphone back from the administrator. "Well, let us just keep the Anderson family in our prayers as they navigate this difficult financial season," he said, rushing to move the program along. "Please return to your seats." Jamal stumbled off the stage, his face pale and slick with sweat. Vivica followed him, her head bowed in absolute crushing humiliation. The crown she had so desperately tried to wear had been completely obliterated. She had attempted to use the church pulpit to destroy my reputation, and instead the universe had publicly exposed her family as broke, fraudulent scammers. The gala continued, but the Anderson family was entirely ruined. Their social standing in Atlanta was officially dead. And the best part was the financial destruction of Jamal was only just beginning. The IRS does not forgive, and they certainly do not forget. I smiled, enjoying the music, completely satisfied with the elegant, devastating execution of my plan. The immediate aftermath of the gala was a masterclass in silent destruction. The story of Jamal's bouncing $20,000 ceremonial check and the massive IRS tax lien spread through the Atlanta elite faster than wildfire. The next morning, the local blogs and society pages were absolutely merciless. Vivica's meticulously constructed image of Black excellence was entirely annihilated. The church board held an emergency meeting and discreetly requested that she step down from all her leadership committees. They also quietly rescinded the Mother of the Year award, erasing her name from the program as if she had never existed. Jamal was completely unreachable, barricading himself inside the foreclosed family home, terrified to answer his phone or look out the window. But Keisha was a different kind of desperate. Keisha's entire identity was wrapped up in being a high-status wife. She had spent years looking down her nose at me, mocking my modest wardrobe, and acting like she was Atlanta royalty, simply because she married my brother. Now she was the laughingstock of her entire social circle, married to a man who was actively being hunted by federal tax agents. She could not accept the reality of her sudden plunge into poverty. In her twisted mind, she needed a scapegoat. She needed someone to blame, and she chose me. 3 days after the gala, I was attending a private charity luncheon at the Four Seasons in Midtown. I was there representing my firm, quietly networking with potential clients. I had just stepped out of the main dining room and walked into the luxurious marble-lined powder room to check my makeup. I was washing my hands when the heavy wooden door swung open violently. Keisha stormed in, her face contorted with a vicious, unhinged rage. She was breathing heavily, her eyes wide and manic. "I knew you would be here," Keisha spat, kicking the door shut behind her and locking it. "You think you are so smart, Nia? You think you can just destroy our family and then go sip champagne like nothing happened?" I dried my hands slowly with a monogrammed towel, observing her in the large mirror. Her designer dress was wrinkled, and her hair was slightly disheveled. She looked absolutely frantic. "I did not destroy your family, Keisha," I said, my voice echoing calmly in the quiet restroom. "I simply allowed your husband to make his own business decisions. If Jamal did not know how to read a balance sheet, that is hardly my fault." "Do not play games with me," Keisha screamed, stepping aggressively toward me. "You set him up. You gave him that company knowing it was going to ruin him. You are a jealous, ugly woman, Nia. You have always been jealous of me. You will die alone with your spreadsheets while I have a beautiful marriage and a life you could only dream of." She lunged forward, raising her hand to physically slap me across the face. I did not flinch. I did not panic. I simply shifted my weight effortlessly, blocking her swinging arm, and pinned her wrist firmly to the cold marble counter. Keisha gasped, struggling against my grip, but I held her there easily, overpowering her. You need to calm down, Keisha, I warned her, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. Physical assault is not going to solve your financial problems. Let go of me, she shrieked, her fake nails scrambling against the marble. You are nothing but a bitter spinster. You are just mad because I have the perfect life and you have nothing. I have a husband who loves me. I have a closet full of designer clothes. You have nothing but your miserable little job. I released her wrist, stepping back smoothly. I opened my designer clutch and pulled out my smartphone. I looked at her with pure clinical pity. Designer clothes, I repeated, shaking my head slowly. Your closet is full of cheap knockoffs you buy from a warehouse in Smyrna, Keisha. You have been faking your lifestyle for years. But honestly, your counterfeit handbags are not the worst part of your fake life. Keisha rubbed her wrist, glaring at me. What are you talking about? I unlocked my phone and opened a highly secured audio file. During the background checks my private investigator conducted on my family, he had uncovered several fascinating anomalies regarding Trey Zuri's scammer boyfriend. Trey was not a music producer. He was a low-level grifter who survived by extorting vulnerable women. My investigator had managed to intercept a very specific, highly incriminating voicemail Trey had left on a secondary burner phone, a burner phone that belonged to Keisha. I pressed play on the audio file and turned the volume all the way up. The sound of Trey's voice echoed sharply off the marble walls of the powder room. Look, Keisha, you need to bring the cash to the hotel by tonight, Trey's voice demanded through the recording. I am tired of waiting. You keep telling me Jamal is going to get a big payout, but I am broke right now. If you do not bring me the $5,000 to fund my studio time, I swear to God I will tell Jamal what we do when he is out of town. I will tell Zuri too. I will blow up your entire perfect little marriage. Bring the money or the secret is out. The recording clicked off, plunging the powder room into a suffocating, terrifying silence. Keisha's face went completely ashen. The aggressive, arrogant woman who had just tried to slap me vanished in an instant, replaced by a terrified, hyperventilating coward. She stared at my phone, her eyes wide with absolute horror. She backed away from me until her spine hit the bathroom stall door, her hands flying up to cover her mouth. You see, Keisha, I said softly, sliding my phone back into my clutch. You do not have a beautiful marriage. You have been sleeping with your sister-in-law's boyfriend behind everyone's back. And Trey is not a music producer. He is a parasite who is actively blackmailing you to fund his fake career. You have been stealing money from Jamal's dwindling bank accounts to pay off a blackmailer, so he will not expose your disgusting affair. No, Keisha whispered, her voice trembling so badly she could barely speak. No, please, Nia, that is not true. It is a fake recording. You faked it. I smiled, a cold, predatory curve of my lips. We both know it is real, Keisha. My private investigator verified the phone numbers, the hotel receipts, and the bank transfers you made to Trey's accounts. I have an entire dossier on your extracurricular activities. You have been lecturing me about family values and marriage while actively sleeping with Zuri's fiancé. Keisha's knees suddenly buckled. She dropped heavily to the marble floor, her expensive gown pooling around her. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, her carefully applied makeup completely ruined. She clasped her hands together in a desperate, pathetic gesture of surrender. Please, Nia, Keisha begged, sobbing uncontrollably. Please do not tell Jamal. Please do not tell Vivica. They will destroy me. Jamal will throw me out on the street. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. Please, I am begging you. I will do anything. I will get on my knees and apologize for everything I have ever said to you. Just please delete that recording. I looked down at her, feeling absolutely nothing. This was the woman who had mocked me at Thanksgiving, who had insulted me on a live broadcast, who had tried to extort me in a hospital room, and who had just attempted to physically assault me. She had built her entire identity on tearing me down, and now she was crawling on the floor at my feet, begging for mercy. I stepped carefully around her, moving toward the bathroom door. I stopped and looked back at her pathetic, weeping form. I wonder what Zuri and Jamal will do when I play this audio file at Zuri's wedding next week, I mused aloud, keeping my tone light and conversational. Zuri has spent over $100,000 planning her perfect fairy tale wedding to Trey. It would be a real shame if the bride found out her groom was sleeping with her sister-in-law right before she walked down the aisle. Keisha let out a loud, agonizing wail, burying her face in her hands. No, Nia, please. The wedding is going to be a disaster anyway. Vivica took out predatory payday loans just to fund the catering. They are completely broke. If you play that recording, you will cause a bloodbath. Jamal will literally kill him. Please, I will leave town. I will divorce him quietly. Just do not play it at the wedding. I reached out and unlocked the heavy wooden door. I did not promise her anything. I did not offer her a single shred of comfort. I simply opened the door and let the ambient noise of the charity luncheon filter back into the room. I suggest you start packing your cheap knockoffs, Keisha, I said coldly. Because when the music stops at that reception, your entire life is going to be over. I walked out of the powder room, leaving her sobbing on the marble floor. The stage for the ultimate finale was perfectly set. The fake empire was already crumbling, and I was about to deliver the final devastating blow in front of their entire fabricated world. The wedding crash was going to be spectacular. 3 months after the gala disaster, the facade of Vivica's perfect family was stretched so thin it was practically transparent. The eviction from the family home had been finalized. I had officially bulldozed the brick estate into a pile of rubble and donated the empty lot to a community garden project, ensuring my mother would never be able to drive past it and pretend it was still hers. Vivica and Zuri were forced to rent a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a highly undesirable part of the city. Jamal, terrified of the impending IRS investigation, had abandoned Keisha, disappearing to stay on various frat brothers' couches, ignoring his wife's frantic calls as his bank accounts were systematically seized by the federal government. Despite the absolute wreckage of their lives, Vivica and Zuri remained completely delusional. Zuri's wedding to Trey was scheduled for the first Saturday in June, and Vivica was absolutely determined to ensure it looked like a royal affair. She was banking everything on this single event. Trey had constantly bragged about his high-profile connections in the Atlanta music industry, promising that legendary producers, wealthy rappers, and prominent investors would be attending the reception. Vivica firmly believed that these phantom elite guests would arrive bearing massive cash gifts, which she planned to quietly confiscate to pay off the terrifyingly high-interest payday loans she had taken out to fund the $100,000 wedding. The venue was a historic, sprawling estate in Buckhead, featuring manicured gardens, marble fountains, and a grand ballroom dripping in crystal. It was a location built for old money, not for a family currently drowning in catastrophic debt. I received my invitation in the mail 4 weeks prior to the event. It was addressed with surprisingly formal calligraphy. I knew instantly that Vivica had not sent it. She would rather swallow broken glass than invite me to the one event she thought would redeem her social standing. No, the invitation had come directly from Trey. He was a grifter, and grifters always follow the money. He had undoubtedly heard the neighborhood rumors about my massive financial success and the fact that I had bought my mother's debt in cash. He sent the invitation hoping I would show up out of a misplaced sense of family obligation, carrying a very thick envelope of cash as a wedding gift. I was right about one thing. I was absolutely going to show up. I arrived at the historic estate just as the cocktail hour was transitioning into the main ballroom reception. I did not slip in quietly through a side door. I walked straight up the main marble staircase, commanding absolute attention. I wore a breathtaking custom-tailored emerald green gown that swept the floor, paired with minimal but incredibly expensive diamond jewelry. I looked like a woman who owned the building, not a discarded daughter. I entered the grand ballroom, the heavy oak doors opening before me. The room was decorated, excessively stuffed with thousands of white roses, towering ice sculptures, and an oversized champagne tower. It was a desperate, chaotic display of wealth that they did not possess. Vivica was standing near the head table, aggressively directing the catering staff when she spotted me. Her face instantly contorted with raw, unfiltered panic. She marched toward me, her heels clicking rapidly against the polished hardwood floor, her eyes darting around the room to see who had noticed my arrival. "What are you doing here?" Nia, Vivica hissed, keeping her voice low but incredibly sharp. "I told security specifically not to let you anywhere near this property. You are not going to ruin my daughter's special day with your bitter, jealous energy. Get out right now before I have you physically removed." I smiled calmly, reaching into my designer clutch. I pulled out the heavy embossed invitation and held it up delicately between my fingers. "I am an invited guest, Vivica," I replied, my voice perfectly smooth and unbothered. The groom specifically requested my presence. He even added a personalized note hoping I would bring my renowned generosity to celebrate their union. It would be incredibly rude of me to decline such a heartfelt summons. Vivica stared at the invitation, her jaw tight with suppressed rage. She knew exactly what Trey was doing, but she could not cause a massive scene in front of the few remaining society friends she had managed to beg into attending. "Fine," Vivica spat, snatching a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Sit in the back. Do not speak to anyone. Do not look at anyone. If you cause even a minor disruption, I will personally throw you out into the street." I ignored her, completely gliding past her toward my assigned table. I surveyed the room with clinical precision. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Jamal was sitting at the head table, sweating profusely, downing his third glass of straight whiskey. He looked terrified, constantly checking his phone, likely expecting an IRS agent to walk through the doors at any moment. Keisha was seated far away from him, her posture rigid. She looked absolutely sick, her eyes darting nervously between Jamal and Trey, terrified that her explosive secret was about to detonate. Trey was working the room, shaking hands and flashing his charming fake smile, pretending to be a successful music mogul. He kept glancing toward the entrance, visibly disappointed that the famous rappers and billionaire producers he had promised Vivica were completely absent from the guest list. I took my seat near the back of the room, sipping my sparkling water, watching the beautiful tragic circus unfold. The dinner service was a disaster. The catering staff was incredibly slow, likely because Vivica's credit card had been repeatedly declined during the final payment processing that morning. The guests were restless, murmuring quietly about the lack of premium alcohol and the noticeably absent celebrity attendees. Finally, the moment arrived. The lights dimmed and a spotlight illuminated the center of the dance floor. The DJ announced that it was time for the wedding toasts. Zuri stood up from this head table, grabbing the microphone. She was wearing a massive, overly embellished white gown that looked like a cheap imitation of a royal wedding dress. She walked to the center of the floor, completely intoxicated by her own perceived success. She looked out over the crowd, her eyes deliberately searching the back of the room until they locked directly onto mine. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight to celebrate our incredible, perfect love story," Zuri began, her voice dripping with extreme arrogance. "Trey and I are truly soulmates. We are building an empire together, a legacy of Black excellence that no one can ever tear down." She paused, leaning into the microphone, her smirk widening into a vicious sneer. "You know, looking around this room, I am just so incredibly blessed. Because some women in this world are just meant to be alone and bitter, scrubbing their little spreadsheets in an empty apartment. Some women are too jealous and too toxic to ever experience real love. But true Queen," Zuri proclaimed, raising her left hand high to flash her diamond ring under the spotlight. "Spotlight, true queens get the ring. True queens get the fairy tale." A smattering of polite, incredibly awkward applause rippled through the ballroom. Keisha stared at her plate, her face completely pale. Jamal took another massive gulp of whiskey. Vivica beamed proudly, clapping loudly for her golden child. I did not flinch. I did not look away. I calmly picked up my crystal water glass and stood up from my chair. The movement caught the attention of the entire room. The whispers instantly stopped. Every single eye in the grand ballroom turned toward me, waiting for my reaction. Zuri's smug smile faltered slightly, her grip tightening on the microphone. I took a slow, elegant step forward, moving out from behind my table. I walked down the center aisle, the heavy emerald silk of my gown brushing softly against the hardwood floor. I did not rush. I walked with the absolute terrifying confidence of a woman who holds the detonator to a massive explosive. I reached the center of the dance floor, stopping exactly 3 feet away from Zuri. I looked at her, then at Trey, then at Jamal, and finally at Keisha. The sheer terror radiating from Keisha was practically vibrating through the air. I raised my crystal glass high, catching the bright glare of the spotlight. "I have a toast for the bride," I announced, my voice echoing clearly and powerfully throughout the completely silent ballroom. Zuri glared at me aggressively, holding the microphone away from me. You are not giving a speech, Nia. Zuri hissed, her voice low and threatening. Get back to your table before I have security drag you out. I did not ask for the microphone. I did not need it. I simply smiled, a cold, devastating curve of my lips, and looked directly into the eyes of the groom. The beautiful, perfect facade of this family had been stretched to its absolute breaking point. It was finally time to shatter it completely into a million unrecoverable pieces. The vast room fell into an absolute breathless hush. I held the crystal glass lightly in my right hand, stepping fully into the center of the brilliant spotlight. The microphone felt cool and heavy against my palm. I looked out over the 300 guests, a sea of bewildered faces, before locking my eyes directly on Zuri. She stood frozen at the head table, her smug sneer replaced by a sudden creeping anxiety. Vivica was practically vibrating with fury. Just a few feet away, her hands clenched tightly by her sides, bracing herself for what she assumed would be my bitter, jealous meltdown. She genuinely expected me to cry, to scream about being excluded, to embarrass myself in front of Atlanta's elite. I was certainly not going to ever give her that twisted satisfaction. I would like to raise my glass to the beautiful illusion of love. I began, my voice steady, resonant, and carrying effortlessly across the grand ballroom. We gather here tonight surrounded by thousands of white roses standing under crystal chandeliers, celebrating the absolute perfection of family. We look at this stunning bride and her handsome groom, and we want to believe in the fairy tale. We want to believe that loyalty is sacred, that blood means something, and that the people who sit at our tables are the ones who truly have our backs. I paused, taking a slow step toward the head table. But illusions are incredibly fragile things, aren't they? They require constant maintenance. They demand that we look away from the ugly truths hiding right beneath the surface. Tonight, Zuri spoke about true queens getting the ring. She spoke about building an empire of excellence. But empires built on lies tend to burn to the ground very quickly. Vivica took a threatening step forward, her face flushing a deep mottled red. Nia, that is quite enough, Vivica hissed loudly, attempting to snatch the microphone from my hand. Security, please escort my estranged daughter out of this venue. She is clearly unwell. I effortlessly sidestepped my mother's grasping hands. I did not raise my voice. I did not yell. I simply looked up toward the sound booth perched on the second-floor balcony and gave a subtle, prearranged nod to the DJ. I had paid him $10,000 in cash earlier that afternoon to execute one simple instruction, regardless of who tried to stop him. The soft, romantic background music abruptly cut out. The ballroom was plunged into total silence for one agonizing second. Then a sharp metallic click echoed through the massive state-of-the-art surround sound speakers. Look, Keisha, you need to bring the cash to the hotel by tonight. A man's voice boomed across the ballroom. It was undeniably Trey's voice amplified to deafening levels. Trey's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. He dropped his champagne flute. It shattered against the polished hardwood floor, but the sound was completely drowned out by the audio recording. I am tired of waiting, the recorded voice of the groom continued, bouncing off the historic brick walls. You keep telling me Jamal is going to get a big payout, but I am broke right now. If you do not bring me the $5,000 to fund my studio time, I swear to God, I will tell Jamal what we do when he is out of town. I will tell Zuri too. I will blow up your entire perfect little marriage. Bring the money, or the secret is out. The recording clicked off. The silence that followed was absolute, terrifying, and profoundly heavy. 300 guests stopped breathing simultaneously. Not a single person moved. Waiters stood frozen with trays of food suspended in the air. The elite music producers Trey had bragged about were staring at the head table with their jaws practically on the floor. The wealthy investors Jamal had desperately tried to impress were whispering rapidly to one another, pulling out their phones to document the catastrophic implosion of Atlanta's most arrogant, pretentious family. I lowered the microphone, turning my gaze back to the head table. I watched the devastating realization wash over the bridal party in real time. It was a beautiful, catastrophic chain reaction. Zuri was the first to break the silence. She looked slowly from me to Trey, her face twisting into a mask of pure, unhinged agony. The illusion had shattered. Her perfect groom, the man she had just spent $100,000 to marry, was a broke scammer extorting her sister-in-law. "You slept with Keisha," Zuri screamed, a guttural, horrific sound that ripped through the quiet ballroom. She grabbed her heavy crystal champagne glass and hurled it directly at Trey's head. He ducked, and the glass smashed into a towering ice sculpture behind him, sending shards of ice and crystal flying across the pristine white tablecloth. Jamal stood paralyzed at the other end of the table. He looked at Trey, then slowly turned his head to look at Keisha. Keisha was hyperventilating, her face buried in her hands, violently shaking as she tried to back away from her husband. The pieces rapidly clicked together in Jamal's alcohol-soaked brain. His wife had been stealing his money to pay off the man standing next to his sister. His entire life was a humiliating joke. Jamal let out a roar of absolute fury. He lunged across the head table, completely disregarding the expensive floral arrangements and crystal tableware. He tackled Trey with the sheer force of a derailed freight train. The impact sent both men crashing backward off the elevated stage. They slammed directly into the magnificent 5-tier wedding cake. The massive structure collapsed, burying both men in a spectacular explosion of white buttercream, frosting, vanilla sponge, and shattered sugar-spun flowers. They rolled around on the floor, throwing violent punches, slipping and sliding in the destroyed cake. Zuri leaped over the table, diving into the brawl. She ignored her new husband entirely and went straight for Keisha. Zuri grabbed a fistful of Keisha's expensive hair extensions, dragging her sister-in-law to the ground, screaming obscenities that echoed loudly across the horrified crowd. The wealthy, prominent guests scrambled backward, pulling their designer gowns out of the way of the flying frosting and flying fists. Vivica stood at the edge of the stage, screaming for security, screaming for God, screaming for anyone to stop the destruction of her flawless reputation. Her wig had shifted askew, her designer dress was splattered with icing, and her social standing in Atlanta was officially dead and buried. She fell to her knees amidst the scattered roses and broken glass, clutching her face as she wept bitterly. All the predatory loans she took out, all the vicious lies she told, and all the innocent people she crushed had finally culminated in this exact moment of pure, unavoidable public humiliation and disgrace. I stood calmly at the edge of the dance floor, watching the beautiful chaos unfold. I took a slow, satisfying sip from my water glass. It was time for the final act. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. My voice cut smoothly through the sounds of screaming women and breaking glass. "Oh, and Jamal," I announced, ensuring my words reached him even as he was grappling with Trey in the ruins of the wedding cake. Jamal froze, his fists suspended in the air, panting heavily as he looked up at me through a mask of white frosting. "I hope you enjoyed acting like a chief executive officer for the past 3 months," I said, offering him a bright, cheerful smile. "But the federal government is fully aware that you legally assumed complete ownership of Apex Holdings, which means you also legally assumed their entire $800,000 tax lien." Jamal's eyes widened in sheer panic, the reality of his corporate blunder finally piercing through his rage. He dropped Trey's collar, staggering backward into the mess of cake and ruined flowers. "The Internal Revenue Service agents are waiting for you in the front lobby right now," I informed him, my voice echoing like a final judge's gavel. "They brought federal marshals with them. You are officially under arrest for massive tax evasion and severe wire fraud. Have a lot of fun in federal prison, Jamal." As if answering my cue, heavy footsteps echoed from the main entrance of the ballroom. The grand oak doors swung open violently. The flashing red and blue lights of multiple police cruisers illuminated the tall stained glass windows of the historic wedding venue, casting an eerie, frantic glow over the shattered crystal, the ruined cake, and the completely destroyed family. The heavy synchronized boots of federal law enforcement officers marching across the immaculate marble floor signaled the absolute end of their reign. I stood quietly in the brilliant spotlight, observing the magnificent ruins of their shattered kingdom, knowing that the ultimate devastating cost of their betrayal had finally been collected. The heavy oak doors were pinned wide open by the sheer physical force of the sudden federal raid. A dozen highly trained agents swarmed the grand ballroom, their dark tactical vests standing in sharp, jarring contrast to the delicate crystal chandeliers and the thousands of imported white roses. The lead agent, A tall, imposing man with a remarkably severe expression marched directly toward the destroyed head table. The crowd of wealthy, prominent Atlanta socialites parted instantly, scrambling out of the way, like a terrified school of fish, desperate to avoid being caught in the catastrophic blast radius of my family's spectacular downfall. Jamal was still sitting in the ruins of the five-tier wedding cake, his expensive rented tuxedo completely ruined by sticky white vanilla frosting and smashed sugar-spun flowers. He was breathing heavily, his chest heaving, as he stared up at the approaching federal agents in absolute paralyzing horror. The reality of his reckless corporate ambition had finally materialized right in front of him. Jamal Anderson, the lead agent, announced, his voice echoing loudly, cutting through the murmurs of the stunned congregation. You are officially under arrest for multiple counts of severe tax evasion and federal wire fraud related to the corporate entity known as Apex Holdings. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Do you understand these charges? Jamal did not try to run. He did not try to argue. He simply raised his frosting-covered hands in the air, trembling violently, as two agents pulled him to his feet and roughly secured heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. The satisfying metallic click of the lock snapping shut was the most beautiful sound I had heard all evening. He looked over his shoulder, his eyes desperately searching the ballroom until they locked directly onto mine. I offered him a slight knowing nod. He had wanted to be a chief executive officer so badly. Now he was going to experience exactly what happens when you blindly sign legal documents to steal from a woman who is infinitely smarter than you. While the agents were busy reading Jamal his Miranda rights and hauling him toward the exit, the absolute chaos of the reception continued to unfold in the background. Trey, the fake music producer and humiliated groom, realized that his entire extortion scheme had completely evaporated. He was not going to get a massive payout from Jamal, and he was certainly not going to live a life of luxury with Zuri. His survival instincts instantly kicked in. He crawled out of the cake debris, wiped a massive glob of buttercream from his eyes, and sprinted toward the ornate gift table positioned near the main entrance. Trey grabbed the massive velvet-lined card box that contained all the cash envelopes the few remaining guests had brought. He tucked the box securely under his arm, preparing to dash out the side service doors and disappear into the warm Atlanta night. But Keisha was watching him. Keisha had just lost everything. Her reputation in the church was annihilated. Her husband was currently being dragged away by federal marshals. Her secret affair had been broadcast to 300 of the city's most elite gossips. She had nothing left to lose, and her overwhelming vicious rage needed a target. You ruined my entire life, Keisha shrieked at the absolute top of her lungs. She kicked off her expensive counterfeit designer heels and charged across the dance floor with terrifying, blinding speed. She launched herself through the air, tackling Trey from behind with the sheer unbridled force of a professional linebacker. They crashed violently into the gift table, sending the guest book, the floral centerpieces, and the stolen cash box flying across the polished floor. Envelopes ripped open upon impact, scattering crisp $100 bills like tragic confetti. Keisha pinned Trey to the ground, her hands grasping wildly at his collar, screaming obscenities that made the church elders in the audience physically recoil. She punched him, scratched him, and sobbed hysterically, completely abandoning any remaining pretense of her refined high society persona. She was a woman utterly broken by her own greedy, deceitful choices, fiercely punishing the man who had helped orchestrate her ultimate demise. Two hotel security guards rushed over, struggling to pull the shrieking, thrashing woman off the humiliated groom. The affluent guests were recording every single second of the pathetic brawl on their smartphones. By tomorrow morning, this exact scene would be the top trending video across every single major social media platform in the state of Georgia. But the humiliation was not over. The universe was not finished collecting its debts. The general manager of the historic estate, a sharply dressed man who had been frantically pacing near the catering quarters for the past hour, finally reached his breaking point. He marched directly over to the sound booth, completely bypassing the stunned DJ, and aggressively unplugged the main audio cables. The low hum of the speakers abruptly died, leaving only the sounds of Keisha crying and police radios crackling in the lobby. The manager grabbed a spare microphone, his face tight with furious, barely contained professional rage. "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen," the manager announced, his voice slicing through the heavy, tension-filled air. "I deeply apologize for this highly irregular interruption. However, the venue management has just been informed that the primary credit card provided by Vivica Anderson to cover the remaining balance of the catering, the premium bar service, and the extensive floral arrangements has completely bounced. It has been declined by 4 different banking institutions due to insufficient funds and frozen assets." A loud collective gasp rippled through the audience. "I need Vivica Anderson to step forward immediately," the manager demanded, his gaze sweeping the ruined ballroom. "You owe this venue over $40,000 in outstanding fees. If this balance is not settled in cash right this very second, I have been authorized by the estate owners to involve the police officers who are currently standing in my lobby. We will absolutely be adding severe theft of services to tonight's rapidly growing list of criminal charges." Vivica, who was still kneeling amidst the shattered glass and ruined cake at the edge of the stage, let out a loud, agonizing wail. Her expensive custom-styled wig had shifted noticeably askew, revealing the harsh graying edges she tried so desperately to hide. Her elaborate sequined gown was heavily stained with brown mud from the earlier sprinkler incident and thick white frosting from the recent brawl. She looked around the room, her eyes wide with absolute primal panic. Her wealthy church friends, the people whose approval she valued more than her own daughter's life, were staring at her with profound, unapologetic disgust. They were whispering behind their manicured hands, pointing at her ruined dress, judging her catastrophic failure. The facade of her glorious black excellence was completely permanently dead. Vivica's frantic gaze darted around the room until it locked directly onto me. I was still standing, perfectly still in my emerald gown, watching her world burn with clinical detached fascination. She scrambled to her feet, stumbling over the hem of her ruined dress, and rushed toward me. She fell heavily to her knees right at my feet, her hands reaching out to grasp the luxurious silk fabric of my custom gown. "Nia, please," Vivica sobbed, her voice breaking, completely devoid of her usual commanding arrogance. "Please, you have to help us. You are a millionaire. You own entire buildings. $40,000 is absolutely nothing to you. Just write the man a check. Please, Nia. They are going to send me to jail. They already took Jamal. You cannot let your own mother go to prison. We are your family. We are your blood. You owe us your support." I looked down at the pathetic weeping woman groveling on the floor. I felt absolutely no pity. I felt no remorse. I felt no lingering sense of familial obligation. I looked at the woman who had happily allowed my brother to steal from me, who had mocked my career, who had evicted me from my childhood home on Thanksgiving simply because I was not useful to her fabricated toxic narrative. I gently reached down and pried her trembling fingers off the expensive silk of my dress. I stepped back, creating a firm, unbridgeable physical and emotional boundary between us. I looked down at her with absolute, unwavering ice in my veins. "You told me to pack my bags and get out." I stated, my voice echoing clearly, perfectly steady, and entirely devoid of emotion. "I am just respecting your rules, Mother. Losers do not make the rules here." Vivica let out a horrific, shattering scream, collapsing entirely onto the polished hardwood floor, burying her face in her hands, as the venue manager signaled the police officers to approach her. I did not stay to watch them place the handcuffs on her wrists. I did not need to. The ultimate devastating transaction was officially complete. I turned my back on the spectacular wreckage of their lives. I held my head incredibly high, walking smoothly and gracefully toward the main exit. The massive oak doors stood open, revealing the warm, humid Atlanta night. The deafening wail of approaching police sirens and the frantic, agonizing screams of my ruined family slowly faded into the background, drowned out by the quiet, powerful rhythm of my own confident footsteps, leading me toward a brilliantly unburdened future. 6 months later, the physical and emotional landscape of Atlanta had completely shifted. The consequences of my family's relentless arrogance had finally caught up to them, leaving nothing but absolute devastation in their wake. The federal justice system moved with terrifying efficiency when dealing with massive tax evasion and corporate wire fraud. Jamal, the man who had desperately craved the title of chief executive officer, was currently serving a 60-month sentence in a minimum security federal prison in Alabama. He had tried to offer the prosecutors a plea deal, claiming he had been manipulated into signing the Apex Holdings transfer documents, but ignorance of corporate law is never an acceptable legal defense. He was completely ruined. Keisha had filed for divorce the very next morning after the wedding crash, desperately trying to distance herself from Jamal's financial radioactive fallout. But her own reputation in Atlanta was entirely unsalvageable. The viral video of her screaming, sobbing, and violently tackling Trey into the 5-tier wedding cake had circulated endlessly on social media. She had become a local meme, a symbol of high society hypocrisy and moral bankruptcy. Unable to show her face at any of her former elite social clubs or church gatherings, Keisha was forced to take a job working the drive-through window at a fast food franchise in a neighboring county. Hiding her face under a visor, entirely stripped of the counterfeit designer lifestyle she had worshipped. Zuri's descent into obscurity was equally pathetic. Following the spectacular explosive end to her wedding, Trey had completely vanished. He abandoned his fake music career, packed up whatever cash he had managed to scrounge from his various extortion schemes, and fled the state. Zuri's influencer delusions shattered instantly. Without the financial backing of Vivica's predatory loans or the fake glamorous lifestyle Trey had promised her, social media followers rapidly lost interest and abandoned her. She was currently working a grueling minimum wage retail job at a discount clothing store in a struggling suburban mall, spending her days folding cheap sweaters instead of pretending to be Atlanta royalty. Vivica's downfall was the most profound and poetic of all. The bank foreclosure on the family estate had proceeded without any further delays. Stripped of her home, her church titles, her wealthy friends, and her entire fabricated identity of Black excellence, Vivica was forced to move into a tiny, incredibly cramped, poorly ventilated studio apartment on the far outskirts of the city. She had no savings, no credit, and no social standing. She lived in absolute suffocating isolation, too deeply ashamed to ever show her face in public, forever haunted by the humiliating memory of groveling on her knees in a ruined cake-stained gown. While their world had burned to ash, I had been busy building something truly magnificent. I stood on the sidewalk of the affluent Buckhead neighborhood, wearing a sharply tailored professional gray suit, watching the massive yellow demolition excavators roar to life. The heavy machinery systematically tore through the brick walls of my mother's former estate. The roof caved in with a thunderous crash, sending plumes of gray dust swirling into the bright, clear Georgia sky. I did not buy the debt to save the house. I did not buy it to live there. I bought it specifically to completely level it to the ground. I watched the final remnants of my toxic, oppressive childhood literally crumble into nothingness, feeling an overwhelming, profound sense of liberation. The physical structure that had housed so much judgment, comparison, and cruelty was entirely gone. Mr. Harrison stepped out of his sleek black town car and walked over to stand beside me on the sidewalk. He looked at the active demolition site, then turned to me with a deeply respectful, approving smile. "It is a beautiful day for a fresh start, Nia," Mr. Harrison remarked smoothly, adjusting his tie. "It certainly is, Mr. Harrison," I replied, turning my gaze away from the rubble and looking toward the future. We walked together toward a small temporary staging area set up near the edge of the property line. A crowd of local politicians, community leaders, and press photographers had gathered. I stepped up to the podium, taking a pair of oversized ceremonial golden scissors from a waiting assistant. I looked out at the supportive, enthusiastic crowd, taking a deep, steadying breath. I was not standing here to seek revenge. The revenge had already been executed perfectly. I was standing here to establish a lasting, powerful legacy. "Today we are breaking ground on the Nia Excellence Center," I announced into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly over the sound of the distant excavators. "This will be a state-of-the-art financial literacy technology and mentorship hub specifically designed for underprivileged young Black women in Atlanta." We are going to provide them with the vital tools, the education, and the unwavering support they need to build their own independent wealth. We are going to ensure that no young woman ever feels trapped, belittled, or dependent on toxic environments to survive. The crowd erupted in genuine thunderous applause. Mr. Harrison beamed, stepping forward to help me cut the thick, bright red ribbon stretched across the podium. The cameras flashed, capturing the exact moment I took the deep, lingering pain of my past and permanently transformed it into a powerful protective force for the future. I had taken the very ground where I was once told I was a loser, and I was using it to cultivate absolute brilliance. Later that evening, the sun began to set over the sprawling, magnificent skyline of Atlanta. The city lights flickered on, casting a warm, golden, glittering glow across the horizon. I returned to my own luxurious, peaceful Buckhead mansion. The house was quiet, perfectly secure, and entirely mine. I walked into my expansive custom-designed kitchen and pulled a bottle of incredibly rare expensive red wine from the climate-controlled cellar. I poured a generous glass, the dark liquid catching the ambient light of the room. I walked out onto my massive wrap-around balcony, feeling the cool, refreshing evening breeze against my skin. I leaned against the heavy glass railing, looking out over the beautiful, thriving city that I now quietly, powerfully helped control. I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of the wine. Vivica had stood in a dining room surrounded by fake friends and told me that I was a failure. She had screamed at me to pack my bags, give up my space, and get out of her house because losers did not make the rules. She was right about one thing. I did pack my bags, I did leave. But what she failed to understand, what her overwhelming arrogance blinded her to, was that I was never a loser. I was a master strategist, quietly observing, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They thought they were banishing me to the shadows. Instead, they had simply given me the perfect vantage point to orchestrate their absolute, undeniable destruction. I smiled, raising my wine glass in a silent, solitary toast to the glittering skyline. I had not just survived their cruelty, I had weaponized it. I had bought their debts, dismantled their lies, and acquired the whole damn city in the process. The game was officially over, and the true Queen of Atlanta was finally permanently resting on her throne.